For much of the 20th century, Americans were taught to trust official statements. If something sounded too extraordinary, too unsettling, too far-fetched, it was often dismissed outright. Rumors circulated, whispers spread, stories passed quietly from one person to another, and the response was familiar. That's just a conspiracy theory. But history has a way of waiting, because sometimes the truth does not arrive in a bold headline. It arrives decades later in the form of a declassified memo, a Senate hearing transcript, a box of aging documents stamped "released." This is not a story about speculation. It is not about folklore or late night radio. It is a story about programs that were once denied and later confirmed. About government files that quietly acknowledge what had long been dismissed, projects conducted in the name of national security, in the shadow of global war, in moments when fear shaped decisions more powerfully than comfort ever could. Throughout the Cold War, and even before it, the United States faced extraordinary pressure. There was a global arms race, the constant threat of nuclear annihilation, an ideological struggle that stretched across continents. And in that atmosphere, decisions were made behind closed doors. Some were necessary, some were controversial, some were kept from the public entirely. Years later, sometimes half a century later, the government itself admitted they were real, mind-altering experiments, secret recruitment of former enemies, radiation exposure on American soil, proposals so startling they seem almost unthinkable today. Not rumors, not fiction, documented history. It is easy, in hindsight, to judge the past. It is harder, and perhaps more important, to understand it. To ask what leaders believed at the time, what fears drove them, what lines they thought they could cross, and which ones they ultimately refused. Secrecy has always walked beside power, and when secrecy lasts long enough, it begins to shape memory itself. Tonight, we revisit projects once hidden in vaults and archives, programs the United States government later acknowledged, often quietly, sometimes reluctantly. As we do, one question lingers. If these secrets were once dismissed, what else might history still be holding? In the early 1950s, the Cold War was not just a contest of weapons. It was a contest of minds. American officials feared that the Soviet Union and Communist China had discovered new methods of psychological control. Reports from the Korean War described American prisoners of war making strange confessions, denouncing their own country, adopting enemy ideology. To many in Washington, it appeared as though the human mind itself had become a battlefield. Inside the Central Intelligence Agency, a question began to take shape. If an enemy could control thoughts, could the United States learn to do the same? The answer, at least internally, was yes. In 1953, under CIA Director Allen Dulles, a secret program was approved. Its name was Project MKULTRA. At the time, no one outside a tight circle of officials knew it existed. Its goal was broad and unsettling. To explore methods of influencing human behavior, to test chemicals, techniques, and psychological strategies that might break resistance, extract information, or alter perception. The experiments took many forms. Some involved hypnosis. Others focused on sensory deprivation. Electroshock treatments were studied, and most famously, the program explored the effects of LSD, a powerful hallucinogenic drug that was still relatively unknown at the time. Researchers wanted to know, could a person's will be weakened? Could memory be erased? Could loyalty be altered? In some cases, volunteers agreed to participate, but in many others, individuals were given substances without their knowledge or consent. College students, hospital patients, prison inmates, even ordinary citizens who walked into what they believed were harmless social experiments. Across universities and medical institutions, funding quietly flowed from CIA-front organizations. Often, the researchers themselves did not fully understand who was sponsoring their work. The atmosphere of the era must be remembered. This was a time of atomic drills in elementary schools, of duck and cover films, of neighbors building fallout shelters in their backyards. Fear of communist expansion was not abstract. It was daily, personal to those directing MK Ultra. The stakes felt existential. If America failed to master psychological warfare, they believed the consequences could be catastrophic. And yet, as the experiments expanded, ethical boundaries blurred. One of the most troubling cases involved a scientist named Frank Olson. In 1953, Olson attended a CIA retreat where LSD was secretly slipped into his drink. In the days that followed, he experienced severe psychological distress. Just over a week later, he fell from a 10th-story hotel window in New York City and died. At the time, his death was ruled a suicide. His family was told little about the circumstances. More than 20 years later, they would learn that he had been part of a covert experiment. The revelation would shake public confidence, but for years, MKUltra remained hidden. In 1973, as the Watergate scandal unfolded and public scrutiny of intelligence agencies intensified, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered many MKUltra files destroyed. Thousands of documents were shredded. The program might have remained largely unknown, if not for a mistake. A cache of financial records survived in a separate archive. These records, discovered in the mid-1970s, hinted at the scale of what had taken place. The matter reached Congress. In 1975, the Church Committee, a Senate investigation into intelligence abuses, began examining CIA activities. Testimony revealed that MKUltra had involved more than 150 sub-projects. Experiments had taken place in dozens of institutions across the United States and Canada. Some involved prolonged drug use. Others used isolation techniques that would later be described as deeply harmful. The public response was one of disbelief. For decades, suggestions that the government had experimented on its own citizens had been dismissed as paranoid fantasy. Now, official hearings confirmed it. The CIA acknowledged that MKUltra had existed, that it had tested LSD and other substances, that informed consent had not always been obtained, that oversight had been minimal. The justification offered was national security. The fear of Soviet breakthroughs, the urgency of the Cold War. Yet for many Americans, the explanation did not erase the unease. Trust, once shaken, is not easily restored. It is important to understand what MKUltra was not. Did not produce a reliable method of mind control. It did not create programmed assassins or perfect truth serums. Much of the research yielded inconsistent or unusable results, but the existence of the program, its secrecy, its disregard for consent, left a lasting mark. It demonstrated how far institutions might go when driven by fear, and it revealed how easily extraordinary measures can be justified in extraordinary times. In the years that followed, reforms were enacted, oversight of intelligence agencies increased, ethical standards in human experimentation were strengthened. Congress sought to ensure that such programs would not operate unchecked again. Still, questions linger. How many participants never learned they had been part of an experiment? How many psychological wounds went undocumented? How many records were lost forever in the shredders of 1973? History rarely presents itself in simple terms. MKULTRA was born in a moment of genuine anxiety. Its architects believed they were protecting the nation. And yet, in doing so, they crossed lines that many Americans would later find deeply troubling. The Cold War demanded vigilance. It demanded innovation. It demanded secrecy, but it also tested the boundaries of democratic accountability. The story of MKUltra forces us to confront a difficult truth. In times of fear, even open societies can drift into shadows. And when those shadows finally lift, what we discover may challenge our understanding of the past. As the hearings closed and the documents were archived, one fact remained undeniable. What had once been dismissed as rumor was, in fact, real. And if a program as sweeping as MKUltra could remain hidden for decades, it raises a quiet, persistent question. What other secrets were waiting patiently inside the vaults? In 1932, in the rural heart of Alabama, a government study began with a promise. Doctors told hundreds of black men that they were being treated for what was described simply as bad blood. It was a local phrase, one that could mean many ailments: fatigue, anemia, general sickness. The men trusted the doctors. Many were poor sharecroppers. Most had limited access to medical care. For them, free examinations, meals, and transportation were not small gestures. They were meaningful. The study was organized by the U.S. Public Health Service in cooperation with local institutions. Its official purpose was to observe the natural progression of untreated syphilis. It would later become known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. At the time the study began, treatments for syphilis were limited and often dangerous. Researchers argued that observation rather than intervention would provide valuable scientific knowledge. But the moral foundation of the study shifted dramatically in the 1940s, because by 1947, penicillin had become the standard, highly effective treatment for syphilis. It saved lives. It prevented suffering. It stopped the disease from progressing into its most destructive stages. And yet, the men in the study were not offered penicillin. They were not told they had syphilis. They were not informed that a cure existed. Instead, the study continued. Doctors recorded symptoms. They documented deterioration. They followed the men as the disease advanced, sometimes into blindness, organ failure, neurological damage. Some participants were even prevented from receiving treatment elsewhere. When draft boards began screening men for military service during World War II, researchers intervened to ensure those in the study would not be treated. For 40 years, from 1932 to 1972, the study went on. Generations passed. Some of the men died from complications of syphilis. Others transmitted the disease unknowingly to their wives. Children were born with congenital infections. And still, the study continued. It is important to understand the broader context of the era. This was the Jim Crow South. Segregation was law. Medical ethics standards were not what they are today. But even by the standards of the time, serious ethical questions were raised internally. Concerns surfaced within government circles. Yet the program persisted. The justification offered was scientific value. Researchers argued that observing the full course of untreated syphilis would provide insights that could not be obtained otherwise. But at what cost? The answer did not become widely known until 1972. That year, a public health employee named Peter Buxton leaked information about the study to the press. The story was published in national newspapers. The reaction was immediate and intense. Americans were stunned. For decades, the idea that the federal government had knowingly withheld treatment from hundreds of citizens seemed unthinkable. Now it was confirmed. Congress launched investigations. Public outrage spread. The study was finally terminated. In 1974, a settlement was reached with surviving participants and the families of those who had died. But compensation could not restore health. It could not undo decades of suffering. The deeper damage was harder to measure. Trust, especially within the African American community, was profoundly shaken. Medical institutions rely on trust. Patients must believe that doctors act in their best interest. The Tuskegee study fractured that belief for many Americans. It became a symbol of betrayal. In the years that followed, reforms were implemented. Institutional review boards were strengthened. Informed consent became a cornerstone of medical research. Federal regulations were tightened to protect human subjects. In 1997, more than 60 years after the study began, President Bill Clinton formally apologized on behalf of the United States government. The apology acknowledged what had happened. It recognized the pain inflicted. It promised vigilance against future abuses. Yet apologies, however sincere, cannot erase history. The Tuskegee study forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. It was not hidden in a remote laboratory. It was not carried out in secrecy beyond recognition. It operated in plain sight, supported by institutions, documented in records, sustained by routine. That may be the most troubling aspect of all. It was not a rogue operation. It was policy. For 4 decades, men were studied rather than healed. Science was pursued without compassion, and the silence lasted until someone chose to speak. Today, the Tuskegee study stands as a warning, a reminder that progress in science must never come at the expense of human dignity, a reminder that oversight is not a luxury but a necessity, and a reminder that when trust is broken by those in authority, the consequences echo for generations. For many Americans, the revelation of Tuskegee changed the way they viewed government institutions. It prompted difficult questions. If such a study could continue for 40 years, if treatment could be knowingly withheld, if the truth could remain concealed for so long, what other decisions made in the name of science or security might history one day reveal? The story of Tuskegee is not only about the past, it is about vigilance in the present, because democracy depends not just on freedom, but on accountability. And accountability often begins when someone dares to bring hidden truths into the light. In the spring of 1945, as World War II came to an end in Europe, American forces moved quickly across a defeated Germany. Cities lay in ruins. Factories were shattered. Documents were scattered or burned, but amid the wreckage, something else drew urgent attention. Scientists, engineers, men who had helped build some of the most advanced and terrifying weapons the world had ever seen. Among them were rocket specialists responsible for the V-2 missile, a weapon that had rained destruction down on London during the war. The V-2 was not just another bomb. It was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. It represented the future of warfare, and American officials understood that the Soviet Union understood that too. Very quickly, a quiet race began, not for territory, not for cities. But for minds. The United States launched a classified effort known as Operation Paperclip. Its purpose was simple, though morally complicated: identify German scientists with valuable expertise and bring them to America. Before the Soviets could, the program began quietly in 1945 and expanded. In the years that followed, more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were eventually brought to the United States. Some had been members of the Nazi Party. Some had worked directly for Adolf Hitler's regime. Some had been connected directly or indirectly to forced labor programs. In another era, many might have faced prosecution. Instead, their expertise was considered too valuable to ignore. One of the most well-known figures brought to America was Wernher von Braun, the chief architect of the V-2 rocket program. Von Braun and his team were transported first to military facilities in the American Southwest. There, under Army supervision, they began developing missile technology for the United States. The rationale was grounded in urgency. The Cold War was emerging almost immediately after World War II ended. Relations with the Soviet Union deteriorated rapidly. Intelligence reports suggested that Soviet forces were also capturing German scientists. American leaders feared falling behind in missile and aerospace technology. And so, Operation Paperclip proceeded. The name itself came from the practice of attaching a paperclip to selected personnel files, marking those scientists approved for transfer to the United States. Background details were sometimes minimized. In certain cases, records were altered to ease immigration restrictions. The moral calculus was stark. Should the United States reject the expertise of former enemies, even if it meant ceding technological advantage to a rival superpower? Or should it accept their knowledge despite their past affiliations? For many in Washington, the answer was pragmatic. National security came first. By the 1950s, the impact of Operation Paperclip was becoming visible. German scientists contributed to the development of ballistic missile programs. Their work helped lay the foundation for what would become America's space effort. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, shocking the American public, The urgency intensified. The space race had begun in earnest. In 1958. The United States established NASA. And within NASA, former German scientists, including von Braun, played central roles. Von Braun became a leading architect of the Saturn V rocket, the massive launch vehicle that would eventually carry American astronauts to the moon. In 1969, when Apollo 11 lifted off and Neil Armstrong took his first steps onto the lunar surface, it was a triumph of American engineering. It was also, in part, the legacy of Operation Paperclip for many Americans. The success of the space program symbolized innovation, courage, and national pride. Few were aware of the complicated history behind some of its architects. In the immediate post-war years, the program had been kept largely quiet. It was not secret in the same sense as covert operations, but it was not widely publicized either. Only later did historians begin to uncover the full scope of the recruitment effort. Documents revealed that certain officials had deliberately downplayed or omitted information about some scientists' pasts. The ethical questions resurfaced. Did the urgency of the Cold War justify collaboration with individuals connected to a brutal regime? Could scientific progress be separated from moral responsibility? There were no simple answers. Some argued that without Operation Paperclip, the Soviet Union might have achieved overwhelming missile superiority. The balance of power and perhaps the outcome of the Cold War could have shifted dramatically. Others argued that welcoming former members of a defeated dictatorship compromised American ideals. The debate continues to this day. What is clear is that Operation Paperclip was real. It was not rumor, not speculation, not exaggeration. It was official policy, and it reflected the complex choices faced by leaders in moments of geopolitical upheaval. The world in 1945 was unstable and uncertain. The atomic bomb had changed warfare forever. Trust between former allies had eroded. In that atmosphere, American officials made a decision that would shape decades of technological development. It accelerated missile programs. It contributed to the space race. It helped carry human beings beyond Earth's atmosphere, but it also tied America's scientific triumphs to a morally complicated legacy. History often presents us with moments of contradiction. The same rockets that once carried warheads over Europe would years later carry astronauts toward the moon. The same expertise, developed under dictatorship, would be used in a democratic society. Operation Paperclip reminds us that progress is rarely pure. It emerges from human choices made under pressure, influenced by fear, ambition, and national interest. As decades passed and archives opened, Americans learned more about the origins of their space and missile programs. The acknowledgement did not erase the achievements, but it deepened the story. And perhaps that is what history most often does. It replaces simple narratives with complicated truths. Operation Paperclip was neither wholly villainous nor entirely heroic. It was a product of its time, a time when the future seemed uncertain and the stakes felt existential. And like so many programs born in the shadows of war, It forces us to ask a quiet question. When survival appears to be on the line, how far should a nation go? Because as the Cold War intensified and technology advanced, another arena of secrecy was unfolding, one not in laboratories or rocket facilities, but under open desert skies. And the consequences of those decisions would be measured not in miles to the moon, but in radiation carried on the wind. In the early 1950s, the American West became a proving ground. Far from the crowded cities of the East Coast, far from Washington's marble buildings, a stretch of desert in Nevada was chosen for a new kind of experiment. It was officially known as the Nevada Test Site. To the public, it was often described as remote, isolated, empty, but the desert was not empty. Ranchers lived nearby. Small towns dotted the landscape. Families built lives under wide western skies. And beginning in 1951, those skies began to flash with unnatural light. The first above-ground nuclear detonation at the Nevada Test Site took place in January 1951. In the years that followed, dozens more would light up the horizon. Massive mushroom clouds rose into the atmosphere. Shock waves rolled across the desert floor. Windows rattled in nearby towns. In Las Vegas, less than 70 miles away, some hotels even advertised atomic test viewing parties. The explosions were framed as symbols of American strength, of scientific progress, of deterrence. This was the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had tested its own atomic bomb in 1949, the E-49. The nuclear arms race was underway. Military planners needed data. They needed to understand blast effects, radiation patterns, impact on structures and equipment, survivability of troops in a nuclear environment. And so, the test continued. Between 1951 and 1962, the United States conducted 100 above-ground nuclear tests in Nevada, but it was not just bombs in the desert. Thousands of American soldiers were brought to observe the detonations. Some were stationed in trenches just miles from ground zero. They were instructed to crouch, turn away, and cover their eyes as the blast ignited. Then, after the shock wave passed, many were ordered to march toward the mushroom cloud. The purpose was to simulate battlefield conditions, to train for a world where nuclear weapons might be used in combat. At the time, officials reassured both troops and civilians that safety precautions were adequate. Radiation exposure, they said, was within acceptable limits. But radiation is invisible. It has no scent, no color, no immediate warning. In the years that followed, reports of illness began to surface. Leukemia, thyroid disorders, rare cancers. Residents living downwind of the test site, later known as downwinders, began to suspect a connection. Fallout from the explosions did not remain neatly within the desert boundaries. Winds carried radioactive particles across Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and beyond. Milk from local dairy farms was found to contain radioactive iodine. Children drank it. At the time, much of the data about fallout patterns was classified. Internal government documents later revealed that officials were aware radiation was spreading beyond the test site. Yet public warnings were limited. Again, the justification was national security. The United States believed it needed to test nuclear weapons to maintain strategic superiority. Laboratory simulations were not yet advanced enough to replace live detonations. The Cold War left little room for hesitation. By the early 1960s, global concern about atmospheric nuclear testing was growing. Fallout was detected not only in the American West but around the world. Public anxiety increased. In 1963, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty, prohibiting nuclear tests in the atmosphere, underwater, and in outer space. After that, testing in Nevada moved underground, but for many families, the shift came too late. Decades passed before the government formally acknowledged the impact on civilians. In 1990, Congress passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. It provided financial compensation to certain individuals who developed specific cancers after living downwind of the Nevada test site or working at related facilities. Act was an admission, not that the tests were unnecessary, but that they had consequences that reached beyond the desert. For veterans who participated in test exercises, recognition was slow and often difficult. Many struggled to prove that their illnesses were connected to radiation exposure. Records were incomplete. Dosage data was limited, and the burden of proof weighed heavily on individuals. The story of nuclear testing in Nevada is not one of hidden laboratories or secret conspiracies whispered in darkness. The explosions were visible for miles. They were photographed, filmed, broadcast in newsreels. What was hidden was the full understanding of risk. The long-term health implications, the internal debates, the data that suggested greater danger than publicly acknowledged. In that sense, it was a different kind of secrecy, not total concealment, but partial disclosure, shaping of information in the name of reassurance. To fully grasp the era, one must remember the fear that defined it. The possibility of nuclear war felt real, immediate. Many believed it was only a matter of time. If testing strengthened deterrence, then perhaps it prevented something worse. That was the argument. And yet, for families who buried loved ones decades later, such arguments offer little comfort. History often forces us to weigh costs against perceived necessity. The Nevada test site became a symbol of American resolve, but also of unintended harm. Today, the desert remains scarred with craters from underground detonations. The landscape itself bears witness. Tourists can visit Las Vegas without ever knowing how close it once stood to atomic blasts. Children play in towns that once lay beneath drifting fallout clouds. The events are no longer secret. They are documented, studied, acknowledged. But the passage of time does not erase their impact. The nuclear tests on American soil reveal something essential about the Cold War mindset. Preparation was paramount. Strength was survival. Speed was critical. And sometimes the risks were underestimated or accepted in pursuit of security. When the government later recognized the suffering of downwinders and veterans, it marked an important step toward accountability. Yet it also underscored a difficult truth. Even policies made in the open can carry hidden consequences, and even visible Explosions can leave invisible scars. As we reflect on this chapter, one question lingers quietly. If such powerful forces were unleashed in the name of preparedness, if communities were exposed without fully understanding the risks, what other plans, drafted in tense moments of history, were kept from view entirely? Because not every secret involved detonations in the desert. Some were written in memoranda, proposals that never reached the stage of action. And their implications were, in some ways, just as startling. In the early 1960s, the Cold War entered one of its most volatile chapters. Just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, a revolution had reshaped Cuba. Fidel Castro had taken power. Within months, the island nation aligned itself with the Soviet Union. For American leaders, the proximity was alarming. Communism was no longer a distant ideology across the ocean. It was in the Western Hemisphere. In 1961, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion deepened tensions. The United States had attempted to support Cuban exiles in overthrowing Castro. The effort collapsed. International embarrassment followed. Inside the Pentagon, frustration grew. Military officials debated options. Containment felt insufficient. The possibility of direct intervention lingered. It was in this atmosphere that a document was drafted. Its title was straightforward. Operation Northwoods. The proposal emerged in 1962 from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and was presented to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Its contents were startling. The document outlined a series of possible actions designed to create public support for military intervention against Cuba. Among the suggestions were staged incidents, what today might be called false flag operations. Plans discussed fabricating attacks on American interests, simulating the hijacking of aircraft, orchestrating violent incidents that could be blamed on the Cuban government. One proposal suggested staging attacks on U.S. military installations. Another outlined the possibility of creating a mock incident involving a civilian airliner, replacing it secretly with a drone aircraft and making it appear to have been shot down. The purpose was clear: generate outrage, provide justification, build public and international support for removing Castro from power. To modern ears, such ideas sound almost unthinkable, but in 1962, the Cold War felt existential. The Berlin crisis had recently brought the United States and the Soviet Union into direct confrontation. Nuclear weapons loomed over every strategic decision. For some military leaders, decisive action against Cuba appeared necessary. They believed that allowing a Soviet-aligned government to remain so close to American shores posed an unacceptable risk. Operation Northwoods was not a spontaneous idea. It was a formal memorandum signed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Lyman Lemnitzer. It was presented through official channels. And yet, there is a crucial detail. The plan was never approved. President John F. Kennedy rejected it. There is no evidence that the proposals were carried out. The document remained classified for decades. The public had no knowledge that such measures had even been contemplated. Then, in the 1990s, during a review of records related to the assassination of President Kennedy, the Northwoods Memorandum was declassified. When journalists and historians examined the document, it caused renewed debate. Some Americans were stunned. For years, suggestions that the government might stage incidents to justify war had been dismissed as paranoid speculation. Now, there was an official memorandum drafted at the highest levels of the military proposing precisely that. It is important to approach this episode carefully. Operation Northwoods was a proposal. It was not implemented policy. In fact, the system functioned as it was designed to function. Military leaders presented options. Civilian leadership declined them. That distinction matters, and yet, the existence of the proposal reveals something profound about the pressures of the time. In moments of intense geopolitical strain, ideas that might otherwise seem unimaginable can enter serious discussion. The Cold War was defined by brinkmanship. Missiles were stationed in Europe. Submarines patrolled the oceans. Intelligence agencies operated in secrecy across the globe. Only months after the Northwoods proposal, the Cuban Missile Crisis would bring the world closer to nuclear war than at any other time in history. For 13 tense days in October 1962, American and Soviet leaders stood on the edge. Against that backdrop, the desire for leverage, for justification, was powerful. Operation Northwoods illustrates the internal debates that can occur within government institutions during times of crisis. It shows that not all proposals become action, but it also reminds us that the boundaries of acceptable strategy can shift under pressure. When the document became public, some viewed it as evidence of deep cynicism within military planning. Others saw it as an example of worst-case contingency thinking, plans drafted but never executed. The truth lies somewhere in between. Governments often draft extreme options during wartime planning. The existence of a plan does not necessarily indicate intent to act upon it, yet transparency matters. When Americans learned of Operation Northwoods, it challenged assumptions. It forced a reconsideration of how far certain officials had been willing to go, and it underscored the importance of civilian oversight in a democratic system. The fact that the proposal was rejected may be the most significant detail of all. It demonstrated that, even in moments of intense fear and rivalry, restraint could prevail. Still, the revelation carried weight. It was another instance where something once dismissed as implausible was confirmed by declassified records, a written plan, official signatures, archived in government files. For many viewers today, the document raises enduring questions. How are strategic decisions debated behind closed doors? What proposals never see the light of day? And how often does the public learn only fragments of those discussions? Operation Northwoods stands as a reminder that secrecy can obscure not only actions, but intentions. And sometimes, history reveals not what was done, but what was nearly done. As we move forward in this story, it becomes clear that secrecy during the Cold War took many forms. Some programs were implemented in laboratories and deserts. Others remained confined to memoranda and meeting rooms. And then there were places whose very existence was denied for decades, locations surrounded by rumor, speculation, and legend. Places that eventually would also be acknowledged as real. For decades, it was a place that officially did not exist. Maps showed empty desert. Spokespeople offered no confirmation. Questions were met with silence, yet the rumors never faded. Deep in southern Nevada, along the edge of a dry lake bed known as Groom Lake, a highly restricted military facility operated behind guarded gates and warning signs. The world would come to know it by a simple name, Area 51. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Area 51 became synonymous with speculation, stories of alien spacecraft, recovered extraterrestrial bodies, reverse-engineered technology hidden in hangars. Beneath the desert sand, the secrecy surrounding the site fueled imagination. But the real story, once acknowledged, was less fantastical, and in many ways more historically grounded. Area 51 was established in the mid-1950s, during one of the most tense periods of the Cold War. The United States needed a location to test a new kind of aircraft, one capable of flying higher than any plane before it. The goal was intelligence, American. Leaders needed to know what was happening inside the Soviet Union, its missile sites, its airfields, its military production. Satellite technology did not yet exist. The solution was the U-2 spy plane, designed to fly at extreme altitudes. The U-2 could pass over Soviet territory and capture detailed photographs. Testing such an aircraft required isolation and secrecy, and so a remote patch of Nevada desert was chosen. The facility operated under the supervision of the Central Intelligence Agency and later in cooperation with the United States Air Force. Pilots and engineers worked in strict confidentiality. Families were often told little about where their loved ones were stationed. When civilians in nearby areas occasionally glimpsed strange aircraft in the sky, sleek, unfamiliar shapes flying at impossible altitudes, speculation began. The government did not confirm the program. Instead, it allowed the mystery to linger. In the absence of explanation, imagination filled the void. Over the years, additional experimental aircraft were tested at Groom Lake: the A-12 reconnaissance plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, stealth aircraft prototypes that would later redefine military aviation. Each project deepened the secrecy. The area was heavily guarded. Warning signs cautioned against trespassing. Surveillance was constant. For journalists and aviation enthusiasts, Area 51 became a symbol of hidden technology. Yet officially, it remained unacknowledged. Even as conspiracy theories flourished, the government neither confirmed nor denied the base's existence. It was not until 2013 that the veil lifted in a formal way. That year, previously classified CIA documents were released in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. The documents detailed the history of the U-2 and A-12 programs and explicitly referenced Area 51. For the first time, the U.S. government publicly acknowledged the site by name. There were no dramatic announcements. No televised press conference. Just documents, quietly posted, confirming what many had long suspected. Area 51 was real. It had served as a testing ground for some of the most advanced aircraft of the Cold War. The confirmation did not validate stories of extraterrestrials. It did not reveal hidden alien technology. Instead, it provided a glimpse into the mechanics of secrecy, the extraordinary secrecy surrounding Area 51 had practical roots. High altitude reconnaissance was crucial to preventing surprise attack. The U-2 program, for example, provided invaluable intelligence during moments of crisis. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, U-2 flights captured photographs that confirmed the presence of Soviet missile installations in Cuba. Those images allowed American leaders to respond with clarity rather than speculation. In that sense, the secrecy surrounding Area 51 contributed to national security. But secrecy has consequences. When information is withheld for decades, trust can erode. The longer something is denied or left ambiguous, the more room there is for doubt. Area 51 became a cultural phenomenon, not simply because of what was happening there, but because so little was officially said. In many ways, the myth grew larger than the reality. The truth, once revealed, was complex but grounded. It was a story of technological innovation under intense geopolitical pressure. A story of engineers and pilots pushing the limits of flight. A story of reconnaissance aircraft that flew higher and faster than any before them. And yet, even after the 2013 acknowledgement, many questions remain classified. The base continues to operate. Its current projects are undisclosed. That is not unusual. Nations maintain secret facilities. They develop advanced technologies away from public scrutiny. But Area 51 holds a unique place in American imagination because of the long period during which it was neither confirmed nor denied. It represents the tension between security and transparency. Between legitimate secrecy and public curiosity. The story of Area 51 reminds us that sometimes the truth is not more dramatic than the rumor, but it is more revealing. The desert did not conceal alien spacecraft. It concealed aircraft designed to gather intelligence that may have helped prevent war. And yet, the reluctance to acknowledge even the site's existence allowed speculation to thrive for decades. As we reflect on this chapter, we see a pattern that runs through many of the stories we have explored. Secrecy born from fear, programs justified by national security, information withheld until years, sometimes generations later, when the CIA documents confirmed Area 51's role in Cold War aviation. It was another quiet admission, another reminder that history often unfolds behind closed doors before emerging in fragments. Area 51 still sits in the Nevada desert, guarded, restricted, active. Name no longer officially denied. Its legacy no longer purely myth, and it leaves us with a thoughtful question. If something as visible as a military airfield could remain unacknowledged for so long, what else in moments of urgency and rivalry has been kept just beyond the horizon, waiting, perhaps, for its own declassification? Because history teaches us that secrecy is rarely permanent. Eventually, documents surface. Files are opened, and what was once dismissed as rumor becomes part of the official record.